Hi, and welcome back to U.S. History with me, Mr. Snyder. And today we are going to talk about how the Allies finally win the war in 1944 and 1945. So, again, basically, we start making a little bit of progress in 1942 and 43, but in the last 2 years of the war, we deliver the final crushing blow to Germany. We attack them from both fronts, and the United States advance in island hops across the Pacific to the doorstep of Japan. In the process, we're able to develop a new and terrifying weapon that can change both global warfare and politics forever. So this second front debate starts in 1943 after the Battle of Stalingrad, and Stalin insists that Churchill and Roosevelt invade Europe, what he calls open a second front, which would be creating another front that Germany would fight on, thereby dividing their forces. And the Soviet troops have had to do most of the fighting against the brutal forces of the German army. So Roosevelt and Churchill hesitate because they don't want to rush into it, and they need more equipment, better training, and more landing craft to invade Europe, and it would have to be through France. In November of 1943, they have their first meeting of the Big Three, which would be Stalin, Churchill, and Roosevelt at this time, Truman later on. As president of the United States. And Churchill begrudgingly agrees with Roosevelt and Stalin that they need to invade France and begin the march toward Germany. So we start setting up in England spring of 1944. We put a ton of supplies there. And the D-Day, or Decision Day, basically the day it's going to go down, it's known as Operation Overlord. And D-Day is going to happen on June 6th, 1944. Dwight Eisenhower is the supreme commander of the Allied forces in Europe. So he led the invasion of North Africa, and he also leads the invasion of Europe, or France. Bernard Montgomery, British general, is going to command ground forces, and Omar Bradley is going to lead American troops in the invasion. The objective of D-Day is to land 4,400 ships and landing craft on a 50-mile stretch of 5 Normandy beaches that are codenamed Utah, Omaha, and those are the two that the Americans will have, are Utah and Omaha. Gold and Sword are the ones that the British will take, and Juno is one that a Canadian force will take. And so on June 6, 1944, 11,000 planes first off destroy German communications and transportation networks behind the lines. And 4 of the 5 beaches are very lightly opposed, but on Omaha Beach, the Germans provide strong opposition to the Americans, and that's where most of the fighting takes place. You can see here some of the weapons that Adolf Hitler ordered. Millions of mines and miles of barbed wire to get through. There's Belgian gates so that ships can't get very close to the beach. And all the while there are machine guns firing from pillboxes and huge artillery guns firing from concrete bunkers on top of 100-foot tall cliffs. And then you can see here in the other drawing the actual map of the invasion, where Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword are at. And then the red line is where they make and push inland later on. And then the purple line is where they make even more progress later on in June 25th. But it's a slow, slow process getting a foothold in Europe. But as it is successful, not without a lot of loss, but Germany is now fighting a two-front war in Europe, and the Soviets have an easier time advancing from the east through Latvia, Romania, Slovakia, and Hungary. British, American, and Canadian troops are advancing from the west and moving across France. They liberate Paris from Germans on August 6, 1944. And basically the Germans can start to see the end of the war, and Rommel and other German leaders plan to overthrow Hitler because by this point he's kind of going insane. And so the German officer plants a bomb in Hitler's headquarters, and it goes off, but it fails to kill him. So Hitler thinks he's even more powerful now because he has escaped death, and he refuses to surrender to the Allies. The Battle of the Bulge is the last great battle of World War II in Europe. It takes place in December of 1944 along the Belgian area of the Ardennes Forest. And Allied troops are widely spread out across a huge line in Europe, and he masses his troops near the Ardennes Forest to give one final push through the American line. And he also sends English speaking Germans in U.S. uniforms to cut telephone lines, change road signs, and basically spread confusion. And this becomes to be known as the Battle of the Bulge because it creates a bulge in the American line. And the Germans recapture many key towns that they had lost before. It's snowy, cold, and cloudy during December, and so air support is not an option. And in the town of Bastogne, Eisenhower and Patton's forces overcome frostbite and a brutal German onslaught to hold off the Germans. And then the weather improves a few days later, and so reinforcements arrive. And Hitler's plan has failed. It's a desperate last-ditch effort, but he uses his reserves and troops, and so now nobody believes that he has the basically the he can't win. He can't win at this point. And the let's move on here. 1945, both Americans and the Soviets are closing in on Berlin from both sides, and they begin to discover and liberate these Nazi death camps where they have sent Jews and other undesirables. And they reveal the sickening reality of the Holocaust to the world. The SS guards, or the secret police guards who are working there, work quickly to try to bury the evidence and burn it, but they ran out of time. And more camps are discovered, and we'll get into that later on. It's decided that since the Soviets have lost a lot during this war, they're going to be the first to reach Berlin, and they reach on April 21st, 1945. The German army at this point begins to panic and desert. They're shot on sight if they do desert, or they hanged from the nearest tree, and they place signs on them saying they're betrayers, traitors, basically. Just before this, unfortunately, Roosevelt suffers a stroke and dies at his summer home in Georgia. And Harry S. Truman then becomes the 33rd president of the United States. He has only been vice president for 90 days or so. He's not very experienced at being a head of state, but yet he is going to have to see the United States through the end of World War II. And on April 29th, the Soviets are closing in, so he marries his longtime girlfriend, Hitler does, Eva Braun. He blames the Jews for starting the wars and his generals for failing to win it, so it wasn't his fault. And he writes this and to be addressed to the German people. And on April 30th, the last day of April 1945, Hitler shoots himself in the head, and Eva swallows poison, and then he orders their bodies to be carried outside, soaked with gasoline, and burned. And so there's no record of Hitler. There's nothing left of him. Mussolini has been captured by Italian partisans and executed on April 28th, so just before then. And so later on, as far as we let the Germans get things in order, and on May 7th, 1945, General Eisenhower accepts the unconditional surrender of Germany and the Third Reich, which had only lasted for 12 years, and it was supposed to last for 1,000. So the next day, May 8th, is known as Victory in Europe Day, or VE Day, around the world. And it's celebrated in France, Britain, the United States, Soviet Union. Everybody is happy that the war is over in Europe, but we still have some fighting to do as Americans. So General Douglas MacArthur and his army in the Pacific, and Admiral Nimitz and the naval forces both work together to complete the strategy known as island hopping. Island hopping means avoiding the heavily defended Japanese islands and go to the ones that are less defended. So if we hop around a heavily defended island, it's not going to matter if we take that island or not. We can just take the next one. And one of the huge advantages is that the Japanese had really, really good code breakers, just like a lot of the countries, but we use Native American languages, which have no written languages. And only a few non Navajo speak this language, and no Japanese do. So they were not able to know what the Navajo were saying. And there's a movie about this called Wind Talkers, if you'd like to check that out. But Navajo troops use their Indian language to communicate and get around Japanese code breakers, which was a huge advantage for U.S. forces. The forces hop from the Gilbert Islands to the Marshall Islands to the Mariana Islands, and we're close enough that Admiral Nimitz begins blockading Japan, and General MacArthur begins to retake the Philippines, which was taken from him earlier. One problem in the Pacific is that the Japanese, because of their culture, prefer to fight to the death rather than risk and bear the shame of being captured. And in the Pacific, we see the first organized Japanese kamikaze attacks. Kamikaze, a Japanese word that translates to divine wind. And so these Japanese pilots are recruited and honored with being able to slam their aircraft into U.S. ships, killing people and sinking ships pretty much. So over 3,000 pilots die in these kamikaze missions. They're very dangerous, and the U.S., it's something they have to deal with in the Pacific. The last two major battles in the Pacific War are the battles of Iwo Jima and Okinawa. These are heavily defended Japanese islands, very close to the main islands. In Iwo Jima, out of 21,000 Japanese soldiers on that small island, over 20,000 are killed, along with 23,000 Marine casualties. And in Okinawa, there's even more fighting. 66,000 Japanese soldiers are casualties, 50,000 U.S. soldiers, and over 75,000 dead civilians on that island. And they're kind of treated like less than Japanese citizens. So they're discriminated against, and they don't really care what happens to those people. After Okinawa, the American pilots are able to bomb Japan, and they start to target factories, military bases, and cities, and they do a raid on Tokyo, which kills 83,000 Japanese, which is more than either of the atomic bombings kill at once. And they also injure 100,000 more after bombing 16 square miles of Tokyo. As far as the atomic bomb goes, scientists were making tremendous progress in the 1930s about nuclear fission and splitting the nuclei of certain elements, including uranium, and that creates tremendous energy. So Albert Einstein, who emigrated to the United States, signs a letter to FDR saying we need to proceed with atomic development. And in 1942, FDR gives working on the atomic bomb the highest national priority. And the name of the project was codenamed the Manhattan Project. And that is the project aimed at developing a nuclear weapon. And the lead scientist is J. Robert Oppenheimer, and the military, the guy in charge of getting all of the supplies and stuff, is General Leslie Groves. And this takes place at the Los Alamos Laboratory in New Mexico. The project employs over 130,000 people around the world, or around the United States, and costs about $2 billion, and that would be about $29.3 billion in today's money. So the first successful test is known as Trinity. That was the bomb's name. They detonate Trinity in the New Mexico desert on July 16th, 1945. It's a success. The flash of light is visible for 180 miles, and the sound is heard over 100 miles away. And President Truman has to decide if we're going to use this or not. The cons of such a weapon are it's unethical to use such a powerful weapon against Japanese civilians. The pros are that the Axis scientists are also developing a bomb, and there's no way to tell how far along they are. So if ours is working, we might as well use it. It would also save American lives, because we are projecting to lose 1 million soldiers alone in Operation Downfall, which would be the invasion of the Japanese 4 main islands. And in the end, Truman has to ask himself, would you rather kill Japanese or kill Americans? And he chooses to kill Japanese. So after this, basically the day after the Trinity test, Truman is in Germany at Potsdam and holding a conference, deciding what to do about Europe. So we'll learn more about the Potsdam conference later. But the Potsdam Declaration is made. And it calls for the unconditional surrender of all the Japanese armed forces. And the Potsdam Declaration is issued by Truman, Churchill, and Chinese leader Chiang Kai-shek. Stalin can't do it because he has a non-aggression pact with Japan, which he will later violate. And this declaration states that if you do not surrender, you will face prompt and utter destruction. And that's because we know we have the atomic bomb and the test had been successful. Japan does not issue a response to this declaration. And so we go ahead and carry out the atomic bombing of Japan on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Hiroshima was chosen for its large size and its army depot. The Little Boy is the name of the bomb because it was a smaller bomb, but it detonates over the city at 8:15 a.m., kills as many as 140,000 people by the end of 1945, and it killed 60,000 people instantly. Nagasaki, 3 days later, chosen for its military-industrial capabilities. The name of the bomb was Fat Man. It was a bigger bomb, but it kind of drifted behind a mountain that shielded the city a little bit, and so it only kills 35,000 people instantly and 80,000 people by the end of the year. And so on August 9th, that same day, the Soviet Union declares war on Japan and violates that non-aggression pact and invades Japanese-controlled Manchuria. So bad day for Japan, August 9th. A third atomic bomb is considered being used because the Japanese leaders are still debating on whether they want to continue fighting. And so on August 15th, 1945, Emperor Hirohito orders his government officials to accept the Potsdam Declaration and surrender. So August 15th is known as VJ Day, or Victory in Japan Day. It is celebrated all over America and other allied countries. And the Japanese officially surrender to General Douglas MacArthur on September 2nd on a warship in Tokyo Bay. And so that is the end of World War II. We will talk more about this in class. Fill out your learning targets, bring any questions, and I will see you then. Bye-bye.